much of dairy is built on legacy, a history of families that have milked cows for generations, but our guest today is not one of them. In fact, this New Mexico crop farmer literally became a dairyman overnight. And you've got to hear the story of how this all happened and how Jack Pirtle from P7 Dairy has continued to innovate and adapt in an ever-changing marketplace, like changing his entire herd over from Holstein to Jersey, and some of the technologies that are saving him time and money on the feed pad and far beyond. That's what I've got coming up for you today here on the UPlevel Dairy Podcast. This is the podcast for dairy farm owners, managers, and advisors who are committed to profitability, sustainability, and excellence. I'm Peggy Coffeen, and it's my mission to bring you the conversations that will uplevel your skill set and your mindset, so you can be a top performer in the dairy farming business. And this is just part one today. Tune into our next episode where we will shift gears from talking about dairy to getting real about faith, family, finding purpose, and what it means to be a four-pillar man. This episode is sponsored by Micro Technologies. Micro Technologies innovates advanced, comprehensive, and integrated technologies to help dairies produce a safe, wholesome product more efficiently and profitably. Check the links in our show notes to learn more about the opportunities available for you and your dairy from Micro Technologies. And now let's hear from Jack Pirtle.
So, Jack, you have not always been a dairyman, right?
No. We actually started farming, or my family started farming here in Roswell. My granddad was born here in 1926, so I think his dad moved here a few years before that. We were just kind of row crop farmers, just alfalfa hay and cotton.
So you guys were farmers, and how did you end up becoming a dairyman?
I think it was the 80s, early 90s. There was a pretty good migration of dairies coming out of Chino, California, or even Chandler, Arizona. I think had a few, and so there was a lot of feedlots here in the Roswell area that went broke in the 70s and left. So there was some land for sale, some cheap land. Feed was cheap. California was pushing dairymen out and staying around Chandler. I think there was just a growth of people around that area that was pushing dairies out. So it was really a place to come. It was very inviting at the time. Environment was similar to what they were used to in both those places. Land was cheap, feed was cheap. So the dairy started moving in, and we kind of switched from the cotton and the alfalfa hay, and the dairies wanted corn silage. And so we planted our first crop of corn in like 92 and chopped it, put it in a pile, and sold it to dairymen. And it's like, you know what? This is actually pretty good. This could be pretty profitable. And a few years later, figured out that we could plant the cereal grain, barley or triticale, behind the corn and make two crops. And I can still remember, I wasn't even out of high school yet. My dad and uncle, like two farmers leaning on a post. If we can grow two crops on the same dirt, I said, we'll never struggle again. And really, that was the beginning to our growth back then. And so then we started doing some custom farming for dairies and chopping our own feed, piling it up on our own place and hauling it back to the dairies every day as they needed it. And 2006, we had a pretty big dairyman that had been buying feed from us for a long time and planted the barley and harvested it, put it in a pile, and was hauling it back to him. And he called my dad and said, "Hey, I don't need that feed anymore." My dad's like, "Okay, that's cool. Like, for next year? No, like, I don't need any more. Don't bring me any more." And so he left us with a huge inventory of feed that we've already planted, harvested, and was hauling back to him. And so my dad and uncle are like, we've got to, get into the dairy industry, dairy business, so that we can be our own customer, vertically integrate. But then we also know when these times are coming, right? Because as farmers, we didn't know when the time was tough or when the time was good. We kind of figured the time was tough when the checks were real slow, and the times were good when the checks came on time. So they made the decision we need to get into a dairy. So we kind of looked around, and one of the guys we were hauling feed to was looking for an investor, and he ended up being a crook, and the bank foreclosed on him. And we were sitting there, and the bank's like, "Hey, do you want to run the dairy for us while we kind of figure all this out?" So that was my first week of working at the dairy, was kind of working for the bank that took ownership of it. And I didn't know what days in milk was. I didn't know what lactation meant. I thought a fat cow was a good cow. So that was kind of how we got our start.
Holy cow. So you like literally became a dairyman overnight.
We had raised some calves, so I had a little bit of knowledge in raising calves and getting those back to a dairyman that was paying me to raise them. But I had like 50 head at the time, and so my first day going around, I didn't know dairy comp. I didn't know anything, right? And so I hired a manager right away, and I just kind of tied myself to him and kind of learned as we went.
So your first thing you did as a dairyman was realize that you needed someone who really knew dairy and put them in position to take it and run, huh?
Yeah, and he'd been doing it his whole life, so he was really good for me, and that was my school, right? I went to the school of show up and go to work, and that's what we did, and we started with 300 cows on that first dairy, and that was in 2007.
Okay, so 2007, 300 cows, your first dairy. You went from being a farmer to waking up the next day and all of a sudden being a dairyman. Fast forward, tell me a little bit about where your operations at now. How has it changed since 2007?
There's a lot. I wrote down a whole bunch of stuff, but like the first thing was knowing that we were feeding with paper, right? So we're feeding off of a paper feed sheet. So I looked into a feed program and put a feed program in. The equipment was all kind of old and wore out. The dairy that we took over was being ran poorly, I suppose, and all the equipment was needed updated. So new equipment. Very early on, I put the mineral in the truck and watched the mineral mix and realized this is my most expensive ingredient and this is how we're getting it to the cows. And so I immediately kind of started looking for how can I do that better. And so that's kind of how I came across the micro machine, and they can dose the minerals, the micro minerals, way more efficient than what I thought we were doing at the time. And so made those changes really early on, 2008, maybe 2007, 2008. And by then I was already up to maybe 900 to 1,000 cows. That was kind of my first go at making things a little better, a little faster.
Did you have a bigger vision of where you wanted to take your dairy business at that time?
I don't think I ever had a goal like, hey, I just want to keep growing, or I want to be this big, or I want to have multiple facilities. At that time, I just showed up every day and wanted to be better than the day before. And you get your breeding kind of figured out and you start creating more calves, and now you have more heifers coming in, and now we're growing internally. I filled up that 1,000 cow dairy. Now we're pushing 1,500 cows through there, and knowing, well, do I sell heifers? What do I do? The neighbor came to me and said, hey, you know what? I think I'm making a move. Do you want to buy my facility? I'm like, you know what? That sounds like a great opportunity. It's right next door. Literally 300 feet away from my dairy was his dairy. So I had bought that one in 2010 and took everything that I'd learned from starting with the 300 to the 1,500 and put that into the second facility. We were sitting there with two facilities, and then I ended up with a third facility. So now I'm milking on three facilities. I got 20 milkers milking 3,000 cows. Had the idea of a rotary in between the two dairies, looked at it on a map, penciled it out, had a guy come design it, look at it, and said, you know what, this all makes sense. So we built a rotary dairy in 2017, and we put all three of the old facilities now into this one new one. So you can imagine going from dairies built in 1980 to one built in 2017, how much more efficient and better everything is, equipment wise, electricity wise, size wise. And I went from like 20 milkers down to 10. And in the rotary, milking the cows faster and more consistent than I ever could out of those two old barns. So that was a huge step for us, and kind of like, hey, this is going to help us in the next 10 to 20 years be competitive.
So you're really able to take three existing facilities and bring everything into one parlor, one rotary parlor, and then able to utilize the existing buildings that you had on the original site, the neighboring site you bought. And then did you have to expand a little bit to bring cows from the third site there too?
No, the third site was just kind of it was 5 miles away. And so I did move my heifers to that facility and then used heifer pens for milk cows. The two old facilities, actually the actual milking parlor, I've tore one down, made it a shade. The other one's still there now. The third one, we actually grow open heifers and some beef stock over there. We've finished in those pens now. But I had to do a little bit of work in the alleys and a little bit of work to move the cows to the new facility, but not that much. Now the pens were like 100, 120 cow pens, and so I had to take out a bunch of fences. My cow pens now are 500 and 600 cows that go to the new barn. So I'm milking the same amount of pens, but we kind of joke now, like one pen or two pens of cows now was bigger than my first dairy. So that's kind of funny.
Yeah. So you're like the real life example of growing and scaling at a 10x level, like go from the 300 cows to the 3,000 cows, huh?
Well, it gets even more wild, right? And we've kind of talked about this. And so 3 years ago, here in the Southwest, we were hit with a quota, like a base. We could only produce so much milk, and I wasn't fooled. I had built the rotary. I was starting to use it, but I built it for a size and a production of like 400,000 pounds of milk per day. Holsteins milking 3 times. It was my kind of the math that I used, and I got caught at 3,000 cows 3 times a day. And so production wise, for what I had invested and what I had built, my quota was set at a level 75% of what my facility was capable of doing. And so legit, I got the email, says, hey, you guys are capped at 300,000 pounds of flow. And I'm like, oh my gosh, what am I going to do? This place, I can't be successful at that level of production. And we don't know at this point how long this is going to be set. So that afternoon, I made my first phone call to cattle jockeys and started shipping jerseys. And I had my first jerseys within 2 weeks, calving and some fresh jerseys. I started milking jerseys 3 weeks, 4 weeks after I got that email, and knew that the only way I could maximize my barn is to switch breeds. And because they were capping our flow but not capping our components. And so right now, as of today, I'm shipping like 420,000 pounds of energy corrected milk through my facility, which wouldn't have been capable with the Holsteins that I had.
Wow. So you made a really hard pivot, and you made it super fast, like not a moment to spare from what it sounds like. And I just want to put this into perspective, because I know a lot of the listeners of this podcast, there's a lot of folks in the Midwest, and I'd say there's a lot more quota in the Midwest than there ever has been, especially in these last couple of years. And so I think there's a lot of producers out there that can relate to what you've already been through and how fast you made those decisions to make a change. But what comes to mind for me is, like, we always talk about that mantra of, why do you do things? Well, because we've always done it this way. And sometimes that even comes down to the breed of the cow. And one thing about lifelong dairymen in some cases is that we get really loyal to a color of a cow, to a breed. I mean, look behind me. I've got my little red and white on the plate behind me. But there's like this pride and loyalty and legacy sometimes in dairying. And sometimes that can cloud our judgment or even a business decision. But for you, that really wasn't the case. So, like, just talk openly for other producers out there that are in situations where it's like, okay, we've got to change something, because the way we've done it is not going to take us forward. And in your case, it was, you built a barn for high producing Holsteins, only to find, and leverage on that, only to find out it's not going to fly. Like, what was that moment like for you as a, I'm not even going to say a dairyman, I'm going to say as a businessman. What was that moment like for you as a businessman?
I'm going to poke. You said there's a red and white cow there behind you. I can't hardly see it. If you want to exit the dairy industry, you should milk red and white cows. That'll be the quickest way. I'm sorry if I offended anybody, but
No. They're just pretty. We just have them because they're pretty.
Such poor luck with red and whites, right? I had a Swiss, and I had some red and whites. I had some belted Belgiums. My favorite cow was a belted Belgium, number 357. We called her Oreo, and I dried her up, no lie, on her like 6th lactation. She was 40 days pregnant. 40 days pregnant. She lived in the dry pen for however long that is. Don't test my math, right? For a long time, 6 months, whatever. Came back and went another 6 lactations. So if you have a favorite cow out there, don't feel bad by saving it. Put her in the dry pen. She'll make it for you. She'll be fine. But anyway, it's kind of scary looking back to it, how easy I made that decision, I guess, or how it didn't affect me. In my mind, when I looked at it, I knew staying the track that we were, only being able to milk 3,000 head, wasn't going to pay the bills, right? Like, it wasn't going to pay. And so some might say that I found a loophole, right? Like here's a deal. They capped the flow, but they didn't cap the components, and they pay on components. And so it's like I've got to make a move, and I got to make it rather quickly in order to survive. And it didn't come without struggles, because I'll tell you, first lactation Jersey doesn't make a lot of money. She doesn't do a lot of anything. She's tiny. She doesn't eat a lot, which is good, but she doesn't milk a lot either. And so Jersey seems like second lactation into third lactation when they really get to be efficient. And so that was a tough year for us. We were half of my dairy was first lactation Jerseys. And so it's like, oh my gosh, we got to give us this. So part of the thing that makes me move quickly, also I may have done it a little too quickly as well, and I was selling my Holsteins as fast as I could sell them, and putting in the Jerseys as fast as I could put them in, because that was my goal and my vision. And I probably could have done it a little slower, but a little smarter. But I mean, here we are now, and it looks like it's set up pretty good, right? We're looking like the class 4 price is really good. The fat's worth quite a bit of money, and now I'm sitting here with 6,000 of these things going through the barn. And so it was scary that I didn't think about it that long. It's like, oh, that's what we need to do, and let's do it. And then my mind went to, how do we get it done? How do we do it the best we can? Who do I know that can help me, right? I had some really good guys that had helped me buy cattle before. So they were helping me not only buy cows and source cows, but also helping me sell mine. And so that was a whole year and a half of buying 4 loads of, I'm trying to think how many I did. It was probably 4 or 5 loads a month, maybe no, 2 or 3 loads a week. I had 2 loads of Jerseys coming in, 2 loads of Holsteins going out.
So are you exclusively Jersey now? Whole herds Jersey?
I got some big old ugly Holsteins left. which is kind of funny. I made the switch from the Holstein to the Jersey, and it was hard. Like, the Jersey comes in, you're like, what is this thing? What did I do? Is this the right move? And when you see an animal really working for you, it is. To say that I'm not attached to the Jersey, I'd be lying, right? And if tomorrow the decision was, hey, we need to go back to Holsteins, it would be really hard. You're talking about being loyal to a breed, and I think that I fell in love with this breed, and it would be tough to switch off of it. But the cross is really intriguing now, right? We're looking at crosses, and we're looking at some numbers, and with the technology that I've adopted and that I have, the feed efficiency, the energy corrected milk, and that's the future, I think, of what's going to push my decisions to do one thing or another. Maybe it's not the Holstein or not the Jersey. Maybe it's a combination of the two. And then what does it look like from there? Are we breeding back Jersey? Are we breeding back Holstein? Or are we breeding those back to beef cross? Because the beef cross calves are worth so much money right now. And so I wanted to get the Holstein switched to the Jersey first before I decided to start crossing the 2 breeds. Because I've had countless people tell me, well, how about crossing? And I said, well, I just want to do one thing at a time. Let's get the transition over, and then we might start looking at that as a possibility, as a 3rd breed, I guess.
Okay. So you haven't dabbled with like an F1 cross yet?
Some. We probably have
Just
a couple
yeah.
hundred.
So, okay. So like the Jersey thing, that conversion, awesome. Pivot it ended up being for maximizing your facility and for meeting your quota requirements. But what's been your progression on what to do with the bull calf that comes out of that Jersey? Like,
So,
have you been able to do some beef on dairy there, or what? How's that panned out for you?
yeah, so very, very early on in calving those, realizing the bull calves were $0. Now, at the time, the Holstein was only worth like 30. So it wasn't that big of a difference at the very beginning, right? This was 2019. And so it wasn't that big of a difference. But knowing that it was a difference, I did start, because I'd been kind of a late adopter. I've been an early adopter on lots of things, but I was a late adopter on the beef on dairy. I just thought, my dad thought that this heifer deal was going to turn around, and having too many heifers was going to be a good thing again. And I was selling heifers for $1,100 and had $1,500 in it, or $1,600 in it. And it's like, man, how much longer can we afford to keep doing this? And so as I was selling my last Holsteins and buying jerseys, is like, we probably need to figure out what we're going to do with these Jersey calves. And so I do all sex semen to my heifers, and I do like 2 or 3 service sex semen to my cows, Jersey, and then we're doing a Charolais cross. And so I sold them a day old for a couple years, and then just December decided I was going to keep them and sell them at 400 pounds. And so, yeah, we're kind of dabbling in that. And then do we keep them at 400 and take them to 800? Do we take them all the way to slaughter? So we're kind of dabbling in that field right now too. We have the facility, we have the feed, and we're gaining the knowledge, I think, that it takes to do that. We definitely were cow-calf operation last summer. This summer with $20 milk, we're back to being dairies again. But yeah, the calf is is worth quite a bit of money now, and yeah, we're looking at how we can really take that and use that extra income.
So you continue to pivot and really just pay attention. From what I'm gathering, Jack, as I listen to you talk, you're always just kind of really paying attention to the market, and whether it's the milk market or the beef market or whatever else, and just positioning yourself to be agile, right? So like agility means, okay, maybe we keep calves a little bit longer right now. Agility means, okay, milk price is a little bit higher, so we're going to sell more milk instead of feeding more milk. Is that kind of part of your mindset or mentality, is just having that ability to adjust on the fly, or creating the freedom and your structure to do so in some ways?
So that's going to be a strength and a weakness. I think I touched on it earlier, right? When I switched from Holsteins to jerseys, I did so quickly. Being constantly in change is really stressful to not only me, but to employees and to others. And so you got to be careful not to just go back and forth really quickly. Like right now, it really seems like a good idea would be going back to conventional semen, or going back to having extra heifers. I think some heifers sold this last week for $3,000. And it's like, okay, well, you're what, 9 months away from a calf, and then almost 2 years away. We're almost 2.5 years. If I made the decision today to change my breeding strategy to get more heifers, we're 2.5 years away from having this extra heifer to sell. And so some of those decisions are easy to make sitting around a table drinking coffee, and then it's different whenever it's like, well, let's put the pen and the paper to it and see where it is. And some of my decisions have been really quickly, and really I like to do a lot of math, and I like to do it multiple times. And I do have other partners that I take this to and go, hey, okay, this is where we're at, this is what it looks like, get their blessing, and then move on it. But I do stay pretty agile. We just added 600 hutches to my calf branch. It's like, well, because I was sending my extras to another guy, and of course he's making money, which I'm more than happy that he is. I mean, everybody needs to make money in what they're doing, but it's like, how can I maximize my space? How can I maximize my guys, my equipment? And I bought those kind of igloo style, California style little hutches, and so they don't take up as big a footprint. And the calves are look like they do really well in those, and added 600 just like 2 months ago. So those things, or like I said, just keeping the calves longer, doing whatever, some of those decisions, there's some thought in it. Sometimes the thought's only 30 minutes, but it really makes sense. Some of it's 6 months, right? It takes 6 months to actually pull the trigger on an idea.
So going off of what you just shared, some of that decision making, whether that is a decision on more of that management side, sometimes the decision is on an investment in the business, an investment in the future, and an investment in what's going to position you to just be able to keep dairying and do so in a way that's sustainable and profitable. And so what else comes to mind? You mentioned one of the things that you saw early on as an opportunity was to save on some of the feed costs with mineral. So maybe just kind of let's start back there. I want to revisit that a little bit more from that standpoint of just making investments that make sense and that are maybe were no brainers, or even the ones that took a little bit longer, being those game changers for your operation. So I'll have you kind of maybe just revisit the whole feeding portion for one. And with that, you can talk about the micro machine and that piece again. I think one of the most valuable things that you can bring to the table, Jack, is a different point of view. Because when you came into the dairy, you weren't seeing it through rose-colored glasses. You were seeing things from an outside view and could see it differently than someone who's living it and doing the same thing every day. So let's start with some of those technologies that just really were good things and made an impact on your business.
So if you want to go back to the mineral, I actually tried putting the mineral in the water. Putting it in the truck, at the top of the truck, not getting mixed well, didn't work. And so there was a guy that I came in contact with that was putting it in the water, and they would dose your vitamin A, D, and E in your water system. And depending on how much water the cows drank the day before, they would meter the following day. And it actually was a great idea, but it grew, well, I think the algae or bacteria that was in the water fed off of the vitamins, and it ended up plugging up my whole water system. So there's an idea for you that didn't work. The idea was fine, the application was not. So I went from that debacle to getting contact with Micro Technologies on their micro machine. And on that one, with those guys, they installed all the equipment on their dime. I just signed like a 2 or 3 year commitment, but knowing that the price that I'm going to pay for the mineral is still a competitive price. So they set all the equipment up, install it, and put the whole system in, and we're feeding rumensin, vitamin A, D, E. I think Zenpro's got a product that we got going through there. You can do Clarifly through it if you do Clarifly. There's all kinds of things that you can put through there that you can dose. And so buying it straight from them, or they're buying it, reselling it to me, is cheaper than what these blending companies are able to buy it for. And they put their markup on it and then ship it to you. And so that one was a pretty easy decision, right? They're going to front the equipment. They're going to maintenance the equipment for me. They control my stationaries basically for free. So that technology just comes with the fact that I'm using their micro machine, because it's the same technology. The same thing controlling their machine. They can control when my whey pump turns on and off. Well, it's not whey anymore, molasses, or when my water turns on and off, when my conveyor turns on and off. And so they just threw all that in for free. And so that's been really good, good partnership and a good company to work with that they're willing to do that. And I check on their prices, and they're competitive. I can't go out and buy those vitamins for any less than what I'm getting it from them. So that's been a real good one. And I started with feed sheets, right? Of course, so we're going way back 2007. And I'm on like my 4th feed program. We won't name too many names, but the one I'm on now is Milk One. And what I liked about that one was that it was cloud-based. And on my phone, while driving around the dairy, you can make adjustments to the feed. You can make it in real time. The changes are made within minutes in the feeder. So before, like if you didn't catch the pin in time, and you make the adjustment would be for tomorrow. So this is all in real time. Right now, we can make these adjustments. And so that's made it a lot easier and more efficient. And it syncs up with my pin counts seamlessly. I've got BovaSync as my management software right now, and it's also cloud-based. And those two companies do a really good job of sharing information with each other and dumping pin counts from one to another. I forget sometimes how much work it used to be changing pin counts, moving numbers into all these different programs, because right now it's all kind of seamless and automatic.
Wow. So that's been a huge game changer, just these different pieces of a system that now all work together. And to kind of just recount where it started, within your first few days when you became an overnight dairyman, like one of the first things you saw was, we are wasting so much money on mineral alone. That's blowing away. And so what do? You're like, I'm going to figure out how to solve this problem. So you try one thing, doesn't work, you find a solution to that problem. And that was, in this case, the micro machine, able to just really get a better handle on the inclusion rates and reducing waste. But ultimately, I mean, it all comes down to dollars and cents at the end of the day. And all of that made sense, no pun intended. And so, how much easier has that made your life? That these different pieces and parts that you used to probably have to spend a little bit more time on in their own segmented pieces of your day are now kind of like a complete system for you.
Yeah. So, like I said, we're what, 1 year, 2 years into the milk feeding system, and I've had the micro machine for, gosh, I'm going to be wrong, but probably 10 years or something. But at the very beginning, before the systems talk to each other, you would have to make a pin count change in dairy comp, make it in the micro program, and make it in the feed program. None of them talk to each other, and so yeah, it was probably a 30-minute process just changing pin counts every
Yeah.
day. But
Yeah.
yeah, so every now and then you kind of go back and remember, oh shoot, I remember when I had to put my vet check in by hand, right? I did it
Yeah.
on paper, went in cow by cow and did it, and now we're using a IDEX system, and we take milk samples and we do some lab stuff in my office and put it in a machine, and it calculates the cows that are pregnant or not pregnant, dumps it into Bovasync, and it enters it in, and done, right? And so we're
Wow.
doing things that are so much faster and easier on the cows. We're not locking the cows and palpating anymore. We're just taking a milk sample as she rides around the rotary. And so that's been a huge benefit and change. But yeah, so sometimes you just don't realize how big a change and how much time you've saved until you get to your next project, I guess.
Yeah. So you just gave some really good examples of things that have just increased efficiency, but also been game changers as far as, I mean, these are great animal welfare step forwards, right? So less lockup time, just being able to integrate what's going on in the parlor and get more out of that cow's time on the carousel. Anything else that really jumps out in your mind as just investments or business decisions, technologies that have been game changers that you don't regret or that you're just really glad you made those decisions to invest in?
So one that I want to touch on real quick too is right before I made the decision, a couple years before I switched from Holsteins to Jerseys, I was really getting kind of deep in the genomic testing and was
Mm.
close to starting doing some IVF stuff and taking some donor cows of my own and getting eggs out of them, or buying some embryos from some, and not for the show world, but for the commercial world. And there's a whole different side to the show animals. But my vision in looking at the future of dairy, right, and you see in the semen world where they've come since I even started in 2007 to where we are at today, what these bulls are producing and how quickly we're able to change our herd and change who they even are, what family tree, we're able to move this stuff so fast. How do you do it faster, right? And so one way to do it faster is if you take your top, I don't know, 1% cows and start collecting from them and creating these cows from your top 1%. Now let's say your top 20% was your top 1%. How much better are you? And then you keep doing that. I think that's going to be part of the future in and being able to keep up with the ever changing demand. The world population is not shrinking, right? So there's always going to be a need for feed, right? The land is shrinking and the population is growing. And I think there's a purpose and there's a reason why the animals are producing more now. The crop plant's producing more now. That's all in, divine intervention, right? It's all a purpose, and it's all for a reason. I mean, if we were still producing the same amount of milk per cow, like there wouldn't be enough milk to go around, or bushels of corn per acre, or anything, right? Just to help kind of keep up with the demand. But I do see that that's going to be a huge thing, and we just started with it. We just implanted our first embryos a month ago, and we did the on-farm training so we can do it ourselves. And I think we're
Mm.
trying to find some cows that we can get some donor cows of our own and do it on a commercial level, not as a, hey, you're trying to get that one off, you're trying to get that one bull in the stud or that one cow for a semen company to buy, which I think that would be cool. But I think if my top 20% cows in 2 years is my top 1% now, like like where will I be? Components wise, feed efficiency wise, health wise, teat placement wise, all those things.
Yeah, all the things. So you're now starting to implement the genomic testing on the Jersey herd.
I haven't started the testing, but we're really close. So,
Okay.
I wanted to get to where I was mainly jerseys or had more jerseys than I needed, right? If I'm keeping every heifer, there's really no need to figure out which ones I need to sell. But at this point,
Mm,
I want to do some genomic testing. I have Affy Lab, Affy Weigh, and pedometers, and I can look and find these families inside my own herd. A cow that's had a calf, she's been bred only one time. She gets pregnant on her first service. She's my top 5% in production. She doesn't get sick. Let's find her daughters, and her daughters are doing the same thing. Let's use that family tree and start grabbing some donors from cows that are on my farm that are producing for me and make 100 of them. So they're not going to be exactly the same, but we're all talking probabilities here, right? So the probability of my best cow making good cows is a lot stronger than my sorry cow making a good cow. Not to say that she can't make a good cow, but
yeah.
probabilities are a lot higher with your best cow, right?
Yeah. Okay. So let me ask you this then. When you really think about the future and positioning your herd and to be the type of cow that is going to be built to last, make you money in your market, and be that one cow that you would want 100 more of, describe to me that cow.
So she's going to be one that is not going to get sick, right? She's going to have a good immune system. And then, of course, she's going to be built right, right? She's going to have a deep barrel, a good udder, a strong udder, right? That's going to hold up. I think on these jerseys, that's one of their weakest links is they're holding their udder up off the ground.
Mm.
And gets pregnant, right? That gets pregnant on her first service, second service, nothing out past that. And a good square udder that you can get the machine on. It seems really simple, but it's like, okay, let's take that cow that has all those things, and it doesn't really matter what her genomic test is. I mean, some of those match your genomic test, but some of them don't quite. But like this cow, I'm actually looking at her, and I want to try to replicate her. Now, you talk to a genetics guy, and I go, well, your heifer has your best genetics. They do, but this is a proven genetic cow. And not to say that there's not some benefit in taking your 9, 10 month old heifer that scored 1,000 cheese merit or whatever we're doing on the Jersey side and saying, hey, let's get some daughters out of her. But let's look at it. How can I do it at a higher, kind of like on the hemp conversation we had earlier? How can we do it on a larger scale? I don't want 10 of these. I want 200 of these or 300 of these. We can't really take a chance of those heifers going to be exactly what this cow is right now. So I think there's a benefit from it. Finding some cows that are actually working on your facility, doing it for you, and trying to make some more of them. And I do think that that's a way to push faster.
Mm. Yeah. Yeah. It's kind of your gas pedal, huh? Like
Yeah.
this is how you get forward faster.
But forward faster, and then knowing that I have to do it, I have to be able to do it in house, right? I
Mm.
don't know that I can hire a specialist, a guy that puts in embryos all the time. You know what I mean? Like I need some guys on farm that this is what they do and that we can do it because we're going to be doing it every day. This isn't going to be a once a week thing or once a month thing. This is going to be a daily thing or more often. If this is going to be actually how I see it in the industry, or at least on my dairy, how do we do it where it's a daily thing or a weekly thing that we're producing enough to matter?
I can hear in your voice, Jack, that when you talk about this forward looking piece, it kind of gets you a little bit excited. What's the next lever that you can pull for the future? Does that get you a little excited?
I've been in this mode for like, I don't know, 16 years. And so it was kind of like, what is it going to be like when I stopped thinking this way? And I think my wife gave up on me probably 5 years ago when I told her, oh, when I get done with this rotary, when I get done with this thing, like this will be the cat's meow. But it seems like there's always a little something that could use some tweaking. And it's kind of like I redid a car. I've got a 1969 Chevelle and I remodeled it. And I'm thinking, man, this is great. That's been 20 years ago. It's almost like it needs it done again, right? So about the time you can get through everything, you circle back and go, okay, so this was the thing 10 or 15 years ago, but it could probably use an update, and just like this management software, like where Bovasync came from and what it can do over the other ones that I've had and what's going to be 2 or 3 years. Oh, another one was cattle care. I just put that in with the camera system, and
Oh,
that's a huge game changer on managing my workforce, because before you had to like sneak up on them in the middle of the night, catch them not milking cows or doing something wrong. And right now, like my camera feed just goes into their system and they tell me, hey, this employee is missing this many cows when they're wiping, or they're not putting the machines on time. And it gives me a grade every week. And so weekly, I have a scorecard and I can take to the employees and go, hey, look, you're missing this. And then it doesn't miss, right? So what other technology is going to 3 years, 2 years down the road that's going to take over? So I don't know that I'm ever going to be done pushing or inviting the next thing into my dairy.
yeah, those are great examples too of just like the game changers that dairy is experiencing, and you're seeing it firsthand, and you're experiencing the benefits of it too by, as you just shared in that example of using cameras and artificial intelligence, AI, in a whole different respect that we were just talking about earlier. But really just looking at that as how can you bring in those technologies to make things easier, but also to position yourself for the future. And you've shared, Jack, the highlight reel of just some landmark steps in your journey as a dairyman. So I'm curious for you today, as of today, do you still define yourself as a farmer, or are you now like 100% dairyman?
Well, here in this area, there was a huge difference between the farmers and the dairymen when they moved here from California. Just because the dairymen didn't have to be farmers, like they could just take care of their cows and that was it. But I think in other parts of the country, like where you're at, I think a dairy farmer is its own thing. There's not really a difference between the two. But like I think West Texas, California, maybe here, but I'm definitely heavy dairy. Like I have partners that take care of the farm side, and somebody asked me, "Well, how much tons of the acreage you get?" I don't know. What corn did you plant? I have no idea. I probably should know those things, but it's like I don't have to. I've got a brother and a cousin and dad and uncle that kind of take care of that, and I don't have to hold on to that information. The dairies around here had to be a lot more involved in the farm side to be kind of in charge and in control of silage quality, where they're sourcing their feed, maybe even buying land, buying equipment to harvest their own, more vertically integrating, as I did back in 2007, they were having to do in 2017 or 2016, right? When your prices of your feed got so high, like that's just another area that you could be, profitable in. But I'm definitely heavy dairy. If the dairy wasn't here tomorrow, I could slip back into the farm role. I'd be bored, but I could slip back in there pretty easy.
So that's part of the excitement for dairy is as much as some things are constant, right? Cows got to get milked every single day. That part's constant. Everything else is constantly moving. And you have your pulse on those movements, whether it's the market movements, whether it's the technology and forward advancement movements. And so in your career now as a dairyman, what's been the hardest part? Like, was there ever a point where you're like, I don't know if I made the right decision. Maybe I should just go back to being a farmer, a crop guy.
Yeah. So when I was on the farm, I was one of seven, right? There was seven in my generation of my dad and my uncles. So back in 2007, there were still seven of us. I was just in control of myself, right? All I had to do was get my own self up, make my own breakfast, do my own job, and take care of myself. And my first day on the dairy, I realized that's no longer the case. And it's grown from there. I got 40 employees. And so the biggest difference is I'm now a manager of people. Animals, equipment's pretty self explanatory. People are not, right? People are ever changing, different personalities, different ethnic backgrounds, languages, the whole thing, right? And
Yeah.
so the biggest challenge is sometimes the language barrier. I can speak Spanish, but not like I probably should or could. and then just understanding those people as people and what makes them tick, what makes them work, those types of things I still struggle with. That's probably my biggest struggle is how to get a buy-in from all the employees for them to care or have purpose, right? And sometimes they're there for just the check. We actually were talking about that the other day, and I don't even know if they're there for the check or not. Really, sometimes I don't even know why they're here. It's really sometimes don't understand some of the people that come to work here and then what they do and then why they leave. It's just a revolving door sometimes, and it makes it really, really difficult. So if I could go back and just be in charge of myself and just know that I have to show up on time, that's easy. All this other stuff gets when it gets complicated.
Yeah.
And
But you'd be so bored. You'd be so bored. So like what you just talked about though with the challenge of the people side, right? Like I hear all the time, cows are easy, people are hard, right? And so what you just shared is like it's something that I think so many other people can relate to, whether it's the language barrier or just understanding cultural differences. And at the end of the day, you used a really interesting term when you talked about like getting buy-in, and you used the word purpose, of trying to figure out like what their purpose is and why they're working for you, why they're coming to work, why they're coming to do a tough job. Like milking's not an easy job. Like taking care of cows isn't the easiest job in the world, but they're showing up to do it. What has helped you? What's something you learned in the last couple of years that has helped with this challenge that you continue to face?
I don't have the answer to this one. This is one area I'm going to tell you, like, don't call and ask me what I'm doing. Like, this is probably my biggest struggle. I'm doing some stuff now through a different organization on trying to figure out my purpose, right? It's got to start from the top down. And I think I've known this from the very beginning, but it's good to kind of get realigned. And what is my purpose and what am I here for? I think this job allows that a lot easier than other professions. We were just talking about actors earlier today, and it's like, how does an actor feel like when he steps back and looks at his film that he produced? Did he actually do anything? Is he actually worth something? Is he getting paid all this money for what? To be an entertainer? Or it's not even his it's not even him, right? And so we were talking about the employees, like I said, even this morning, about like purpose. And in ag and in dairy, I mean, it's really easy to look like, hey, we're producing a product that is worldwide, right? And we're feeding the whole earth. We're not just feeding our local area. We're not just feeding the United States. Like, this stuff gets shipped powder or cheese or whatever all over the place. And you look at that and go, wow. So I come every day and we load up those trucks full of milk, and that milk gets sent out. And that's not only a product that a lot of people use, but it's a nutritious product and a good product for people to have and that people enjoy. And so I sometimes have to drive around and look at it, kind of step back and go, wow, this is like really huge and really important and fulfilling and satisfying.
Yeah. And so you are doing the hard work right now of nailing down what that means to you personally. It's a lot easier to look at which contract to sign and what's your next tech investment in the dairy. But sometimes the hard work is the deep work. And that's really getting clear on what drives you. And as you said, doing that for yourself is the start of what trickles down for the people that work for you, for your culture.
You just heard from New Mexico dairyman Jack Pirtle from P7 Dairy. And if your ears perked up when you heard him talk about the micro machine, you can find more information on that in our show notes when you click on the link for Microtechnologies. In fact, Microtechnologies is a sponsor of this episode. Microtechnologies innovates advanced, comprehensive, and integrated technologies to help dairies produce a safe, wholesome product more efficiently and profitably. I'm Peggy Coffeen, and thank you for listening to this UPlevel Dairy podcast.